as you've said, during peacetime, there is a council of ministers, which is political and civilian. And when the war came, the Council of Ministers really stood down, and the National Security Defense Council became the National Strategic Policy Advisory Group to President Zelensky.
Yeah, this is according to our legislation, Ukrainian legislation. Yeah.
Okay.
So-called staff, which means like Supreme Commander staff, is so the staff of the NSDC turns to Supreme Commander staff during the war period of time. It's according to a current Ukrainian legislation.
So the situation as of Thursday last week, the 27th of February, was that the war had been going on for 3 years. Russia controls about 20% of Ukrainian territory. And Andrii, if I say anything that's wrong or you disagree with, please say so. So I'm giving the figures as I understand them. If I'm wrong, just correct me, please. There's about 3 to 3.5 million Ukrainians living under Russian control. There are about 7 million Ukrainians who have left Ukraine since the war, mainly to Poland, but to other places as well. There are about 3 million, I think, internally displaced Ukrainians who have had to move away. About 15% of the total housing stock of Ukraine has been destroyed. So that's one in 8. There have been incredible impacts on power, on resources, etc., etc. Right, okay. Under that situation, President Zelensky went to Washington to meet Donald Trump with the idea that they would sign an agreement that in return for ownership, let's say, or rights to 50% of Ukrainian minerals, which is about $500 billion, America would use its influence in order to come in and put a ceasefire on the table. We all know what happened in the White House on the 28th of February. It was something that none of us, I've been observing politics for 30 years, and none of us have ever seen anything like that. Before we start, what is the situation? What's the feeling in Kiev now? What's the feeling about what the Americans did, what Trump did? Zelensky seems to be saying that there is still a deal to be made, that he still respects the president. There is still a conversation to be had. So is this just part of some sort of Trumpian negotiating deal, or is this something that is basically a genuine change in the situation?
Oh, thank you very much for this question. I think the problem is much bigger than we ever might think. So the problem is that a new elected current power in the United States, and Trump personally as a politician, I'm afraid they don't share quite significant things. So probably they are not aware of that. Are really significant and the most important things in the life of any nation in the West. I'm talking about the values. My first reaction on that kind of negotiation was, you can't measure freedom and dignity by money. That's the problem. I guess the United States and current officials of the United States, they have lost, or probably they never had, that kind of understanding what our values mean for the really democratic world. And people of Ukraine are fighting for the last 3 years and sharing those values with the rest of the world. And that's the key point, which probably Trump doesn't understand. It's not about territories. It's not about a local conflict between two similar nations, Russians and Ukrainians. It's about a great divide on democratic world and authoritarian world. So we are struggling for the rest of the world. And it's pity that Trump doesn't understand that. And I think it's a total disaster for external for foreign policy of the United States right now. And I think Trump caught himself in a trap, because there is no exit from this trap when one of the parties, can, as he said, for tango, you need a duo, you need a duet. So if our party will never accept it, and we will never accept it, because we haven't invaded Russia. David, I live here in Kiev. I live in the countryside. I have 3 kids and my wife, my family well. And when we woke up on 24th of February at 5 a.m., we woke up of explosions, and whole our house was shaking and trembling. I will never forget that moment. I've read a lot about the kids of war during Second World War, because I was born in Soviet Union. I called a bit that times, and I just a bit remember about that. But I never would have thought that my kids would be the kids of war. So we didn't attack Putin; he attacked us, and see what is the danger? How this narrative, victory of Ukraine, support as long as it takes, slightly turned to a peace negotiation, cessation of the fire, inversion of Trump. How that come? How we allow to turn this narrative from the victory of Ukraine and from support as long as it takes to a kind of cessation of the fire? So we should give up our territories, which belong to us and recognized by the whole world. We must give up our infrastructure there, our mineral resources. For what sake? Because Trump decided that. I would like him to come here and to explain his logic to the soldiers, to the families that suffering every night here of shelling. And I think it's really dangerous for Ukraine if the United States will step back from the support of Ukraine, which means they step back from our common values.
Let me go back to, you mentioned the 24th of February 2022, when the invasion happened. The smart money was Putin in Kiev in 3 days. Biden offered a way out to Zelensky to fly him out. He said, I don't need a taxi, I need weapons. Andrii, you were as deep into the Ukrainian decision-making as anybody could possibly be. Did you ever believe that you were going to lose? Was that a possibility in your mind, that Ukraine could actually be defeated by Russia in this war, right from the day one?
Well, of course, I never believed in that, because I knew that we will resist, and I knew that we will defend ourselves. I clearly remember those times when, starting from November of 2023, we had on a constant basis, like on a monthly basis, the ambassadors of the United States and the UK and some others of Europe are coming to our office and offering to us, like, well, you should be prepared to be a government in exile, because Russians will take you to the concentration camp. and so on. We will help you. We will take you out of Ukraine, and probably you'll be the government in exile somewhere in London or in Poland, whatever. And we were really wondering, why they are talking that way. So my question to intelligence services of the United States, the United Kingdom, and others: are you guys calculated the nature of Ukrainian nation? Have you ever discovered that spirit that took us through the thousands of years, and despite all the challenges we had in our history along the last 1,000 years, we still exist, we still live, and we build our country? So we were really wondering why they don't believe in us. So I think it's probably an affection of this last 32 years of total calmness, in the world, when Soviet Union collapsed and the Western world thought that there is no enemy, no more enemies, no more two poles on this globe. And intelligence services probably degraded in some way if they could not understand that we will fight anyway. So that was really a funny moment. You made a great point. We always knew that we will fight, and we've been preparing ourselves for fighting. But the problem of Putin, he miscalculated this matter as well. So he was obsessed by the reports of his influences here in Ukraine, claiming that everything is under control and Russians are really welcome here and people are suffering of Zelensky and so on. So he was also he misunderstood actually the real situation. That's why they were marching, having a parade uniform in their stocks, and they really believed that it's going to be just an easy walk to Kiev, to capture, and everybody will welcome them with the flowers and so on. But that was a great mistake of Putin. And by the way, according to our role in a peaceful time, we made a lot to prevent actually this war and make those Russian influences here much more weaker. For example, we imposed sanctions against Medvedchuk, the key person for Putin here in Ukraine. Probably you heard of him. He's a Ukrainian politician, extremely pro-Russian. And so he was the guy, he was the agent of Putin here. And he's supposed to take the power after Zelensky's murder or dismissal or whatever scenario might be. So we sanctioned him in 2021. We deprived him of his assets, including financial assets, by which he could handle that specific network of Russian-influenced people here in Ukraine, in the government, in the objects of critical infrastructure like energy objects and so on, so on, so on. So we made some preventions before that.
Okay, so there's one more question I want to ask you looking back, and then we can look forward. So the question I want to ask you looking back is, I was at a briefing, closed-door briefing in about June 2022, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was the Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine speaking through a translator.
Yeah.
And he said that when they thought there was a possibility of the invasion happening, the minister said to the generals, what's going to happen? Okay, let's say there's an invasion, what's going to happen? And the general said, we don't want them to invade. But the phrase he used was, the translator used was, if they invade, we will slap them and we will send them home because we know these people. We've been fighting them in the Donbass, Crimea since 2014. We know them. They've got 10% good soldiers, 90% rubbish soldiers. We don't know. But then what he said was, we knew that when we slapped them and sent them home, they would do what Russians always do, is they will step back and they'll send in artillery, just like they did in Grozny, just like they did in Aleppo. He said, we knew right from the beginning, we needed air defense. We knew that. And Ukraine did not get good air defense, and it was not given the permission to use offensive. Somebody used the phrase, we were given the weapons to bleed, but not to win.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true? Do you think that somehow, for some reason, Ukraine was given enough to stop it losing, but was not given enough to allow it to win?
Yeah, we have a specific joke here. Probably I can, express it now. We called President Biden as a 2L. Too little, too late, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's completely aligning with your point. Yeah, we really suffered of the lack of the military equipment, artillery ammunition, air defense systems, and so on.